Now, with Rwanda seeking to transform itself into a knowledge-led economy, there have been concerns over what is already being done to achieve this. Herine Otieno-Menya, Director, Teacher Training Program at AIMS Rwanda, now joins us to talk about how the private sector can help Rwanda achieve this goal. Thank you very much for joining us, Herine.
Thank you.
How can the private sector do this?
Well, the private sector, first and foremost, needs to acknowledge that they're key consumers of the product of teaching. That is the students that come out of our schools. And therefore, it is in their interest that there's quality teaching and learning going on. And so we need to work together with the government and put resources in supporting activities around developing or enhancing the skills of the teachers. So I would say, for example, our organization, African Institute for Mathematical Sciences, through a program that is based within a wider program supported by MasterCard Foundation, so an example of a private sector entity. So MasterCard Foundation has a wider program they call Leaders in Teaching Program, and through that they're interested in enhancing the skills of teachers to ensure that the students or the learners that get out of our schools have the skills and the competencies that they need for work and for life. So I guess in a nutshell, we need to come on board and even come on board in a bigger way. And we as AIMS are very committed to that because for a long time, we have, focused on training postgraduate students. But we've got to realize that we need to go down, dig deeper, and get our hands, quote unquote, dirty in terms of being part of the process of the formative years. So right now, our pilot program, I would say, the AIMS TTP program is about teacher training program for maths and science teachers.
Maths and science teachers.
And we're working very closely with the government, in this case, the Rwanda Education Board. Yeah.
Herine, of course, you are a teacher trainer yourself, no?
Yes.
Tell me, what are some of the challenges that you see are very heavy for the teachers in Rwanda or the teacher trainers? What are some of the challenges that you meet on a daily basis as you try to put these teachers in line with what we're looking at?
Well, I guess the challenges will vary on who is doing it, but I think one common challenge is just having enough resources to do as in-depth training and especially experiential training. Because sometimes the challenge is when you want to take the training outside the class or the learning environment and it becomes a little technical and not practical, not alive or akin to the real challenges that the teachers are actually facing. And I think part of that is in actual training, but also I think part of it is also in collecting the evidence to ensure that the policies that underlie the teaching and training and assessment in schools are continuously improved to take cognizance of the challenges and the realities that teachers are facing in class. So I'll give you an example. Our AIMS TTP program, even though it is teacher training program, has 4 main pillars. So one of them, of course, is training the teachers in what we are calling innovative gender-responsive pedagogies. But the other 3 pillars are about providing resources or enhancing the resources that are there for the teachers to use to support them in their learning. The third one, which is very critical and perhaps connects to this conversation, is public engagement. Because we realize that part of what affects the teachers' uptake of the instructional practices that you train them. Part of it is their knowledge, their beliefs, and their attitudes. And their attitudes, for example, essentially are actually inculcated, sometimes at a very early age, by the society or continuously out of what's happening within us. And finally is the issue of collecting evidence continuously, so that this evidence, we can use it as part of the dialogue that you're having with the government and other private sector or stakeholders.
Herine, you're talking about public engagement and the importance this carries, but talk to me more about the importance now of the community back into all of this conversation. How do they get to be part of this?
So the community is very critical because in the learning and teaching equation is a student. And we always say the student does not come as a blank slate in class. And beyond perhaps the technical knowledge that the student comes with, he or she comes with affective realities, the emotional orientation towards learning, their values or cultural realities, and all that goes back to the community. But in an African context, even more important, if you think about secondary school, for example, most of our students are day scholars. And the way our curriculum is that most of the time when they're in school, the teachers are teaching. There's hardly time to reflect and internalize. So the only place and space they should be able to do that is back at home. So depending on the environment, how stimulating academically it is or how supportive it is for the students to be able to sit back and reflect or internalize and practice some of the things that they've been taught. That will determine how much the student learns. So the community, starting with the parents in the home, the neighbors, and as an African culture, all the other people, your extended family, really are important in shaping the disposition, whether it is the issue of being persistent or the issue of being motivated and given towards learning. It goes back not to the school, but back to the community. So it's a very critical part.
You're talking about community, which is rather very interesting. But let's bring this back to the school first and foremost. I mean, when you're between the age of, say, 5 to 18, school is more like something they're pushing you to go to instead of something that you should enjoy. How are we making the environment at school more enjoyable for the youth? Because, I mean, you're trying to train them to do something that they would enjoy, but it's not really that enjoyable. So talk to me about how we transform the classroom and bring it to the community as well.
I think part of the transformation is in the pedagogical practices. So for a long time, our teaching was more behavioral, where the teacher was like the star, the sage on the stage. But as we change our pedagogies, as you look at, let's say, competency-based curriculum, and within that, part of what is being promoted is learner-centered teaching, where the learner becomes central to the teaching. And therefore, you want to invoke the interest of the learners in the learning process. So the more we get competent at doing that, and the more we are able to support that within the challenges of the realities that our teachers are teaching, the more interesting and the sense of connection the students will have. And as you say, the more also that the parent-teacher relationship is enhanced, that also will contribute, because if the conversation back at home is positive about learning, and there's a sense of that continuity of discussion and putting the learner at the center and making them see the value, then they're likely to enjoy themselves and see why they need to be able to go to school.
Before I let you go, one of the biggest, of course, constraints to seeing more youth coming out and being employable is that we're still seeing so many educational systems being changed back and forth. Are we playing catch up with some parts of the world?
Well, no and yes.
Start with the no and then we go to the yes.
No, because learning is a continuing, supposed to continuously be improved. So as we do our research, as we get to understand ourselves better, the learners' dispositions, the demands of the workplaces or the societies are continuously changing. So ideally, yes, our education system needs to continuously change for the better.
All right.
So no, yes, because sometimes in the process of wanting to seek those solutions, there's a tendency sometimes from the African states to go to the Western, and there's nothing wrong with that because there's no need of reinventing the wheel. The problem, however, is when we pick it and we do not contextualize it. So there is opportunity to learn from the other parts, but we need to make sure it is relevant to us.
Yeah, but then relevance is one thing, but also getting the teachers ready for the new systems that we bring upon them, like every year. The other year you bring something new. My tongue is stuck here because I'm trying to say something.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's a challenge that we are all living with, and we must step up to the challenge. And I know, like, for example, Rwanda Education Board, last week, but I was in not a training, but in an activity that was being led by Rwanda Education Board, where we're trying to develop tools to try and assess the teachers' uptake of the new competency-based curriculum. And I think such initiatives are very positive, because by going back to them and finding out how well they've been able to master or what difficulties they are facing or realities that they're facing, it will then be very easy to input that feedback and improve the subsequent training. So I guess we can't run away from change, and we can't run away from wanting to see change happen. The only thing is that we need to be more systematic, and that's where science research is very important. That's where an institution as AIMS is very important. Our role in it is going to be very important, because excellence in science and research is one of our...
You're very keen on science and research, and we've seen the president of the country, President Paul Kagame, coming up in support with this. We've seen a lot of other, big names out here coming out to support science and research. But tell me, are we giving research ample time to actually play its role while we're doing all of this teacher training, education system change, all of this?
Well, I must say it has been a weakness for some time, I would say, across Africa, where perhaps sometimes, especially when the trainings are donor funded, sometimes the donors just want to see results. How many people have you trained? And it's just numbers. But I think
that doesn't help.
Yes, there is a reawakening that we need to go slow, start small to create big change, and be keen to learn lessons and continuously integrate the lessons and ensure that you don't have a fixed intervention, we have an intervention that's organically growing.
Right. Thank you so much for creating time. And of course, that was Herine Otieno-Menya, the Director for Teacher Training Program at Africa Institute of Mathematical Sciences.